Hi, welcome to the demo debate of the 15th Summer Asian Debate Institute. I now call this House to order under the motion, this House would ban religious proselytizing in prisons. On opening government, we have Chen Lin and Siron. On closing government, we have Heon and Jan. On opening opposition, we have NC and what's your name? Wenyu. On closing opposition, we have Jake and Shubina. Sorry. That was very appropriate. I'm a terrible chair. Without any further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to open the case for side government.
Before you speak, will you announce the motion one more time on the video?
The motion for this mock debate is that this House would ban religious proselytizing in prisons or religious conversions, religious proselytizing.
What is the actual wording?
Ban religious proselytizing in prisons.
Okay. Wonderful.
Everybody's lost.
I have a problem wrapping the word. We've changed the word. The debaters have changed the word to this House would ban religious preaching in prison. Sorry, CA. Inculcating the difficult and harsh conditions of the prison, of a person's prison life, and the processes and activities that he's forced to go to, we will argue from opening government that the active choice to convert into a religion is not an informed choice if that choice is facilitated by religious institutions. And opening government will argue that it's a manipulative act by religious institutions, and it's something that the state will not endorse. Before I argue two things to you, I'll tell you why it isn't a legitimate choice and why it's important that it must be all actions that the state facilitates must be a legitimate choice, and the harms that you'll accrue if that does not happen. We have a few things to clarify. Number one, we will ban active preaching or active proselytizing or active religious processes to convert a particular prisoner to a particular faith, but we will not ban if someone wants to seek or wants some advice on any spiritual or religious realm. So if they want to read the Bible, they can go to the library to do so. If they want religious counseling, they can ask for a priest to visit.
Sir.
Not right now. What are our substantives? In my speech, you will hear why it's important that all actions need to be a legitimate choice and why this is not. Number one, we argue that the pressures and practice of prison life is too harsh on a particular individual in order for us to say that that person has made that legitimate choice. We'll give you a couple of examples. 2 out of 7 men in the United States that enter prison for a period of time of more than 10 years end up leaving with HIV/AIDS, ladies and gentlemen. This is due to a number of reasons. Number one, it could be because of sexual crimes, it could be because of rampant drug use or bullies. These are the kinds of realities that exist within the prison systems, and they cannot deny that. The amount of considerations is not proportionate to the eventual irreversible choice that he or she will have to make. But before I move on, if you have a clarification.
What are your feelings on such preachings taking place in orphanages or homeless shelters?
Great. So the question, the parallel that she's drawing is, say, orphanages or soup kitchens. These are individuals that eventually have a choice to partake in any counter discourse, or they're not confined to the difficult scenarios of prison. If she can prove that living as an orphan in an orphanage is tantamount to a prisoner being sexually abused in prison, we'll ban that as well, right? Second reason, it makes it more difficult for individuals to make an informed and legitimate choice. Whenever a person is under a certain amount of duress or is in a situation where he cannot opt out of that particular decision, the state never recognizes this as a legitimate choice. That's why if you're coerced into signing a particular contract, we don't recognize that contract as legitimate. That's why if you can't sign wills when you're about to die, ladies and gentlemen, because these are decisions that are not made as a legitimate choice. The reason is because the repercussions of these actions are too harmful. Have a seat. Let's talk about why that particular choice is not proportional. Why is there a tilt in the balance? Firstly, the religious promises of forgiveness and repentance is too overwhelming for someone to deny. If I have committed murder or if I have committed theft and appropriated property not belonging to me, I'll take opening in a second, then the ultimate say that religion has is that as long as you repent and promise not to do any of these actions again, or if you promise to God and to yourself that you will pray 5 times a day or 3 times a day or attend service every Sunday, then you will be promised eternal happiness at the end of your life. This is why this particular balance is not achieved when you're making this calculus, this decision, ladies and gentlemen. But before I move on, yes.
Well, I think it's in the life. People have a hard life, that is why they go religious. Under your reasonings, everybody shouldn't have this preaching in the normal life too.
No, that's not true. I don't think in my daily life, in my routine, when I'm going to work, when I'm going to school, if I'm a student, that I face the same adverse decisions or adverse conditions as I do when I go to prison. No more POIs. Thank you very much. So, why is it important to facilitate a real choice? Let's talk about the prisoners that eventually get out. Prisoners that get out on parole. These are prisoners that will leave prison, that will enjoy the fulfillment of their natural life, that will go probably rehabilitate, probably amalgamate back into society. Why is it important for these individuals to not have gone through this process of manipulation? Number one, if they eventually seek a spiritual life, or if they want to find a spiritual end or spiritual life, ladies and gentlemen, they would compare it to the sort of decisions that they had to make in prison and understand that the religious institution took it upon themselves to manipulate and to coerce them into being followers of that particular religious institution. No, have a seat. The level of betrayal that this individual will have to realize will then make it much more difficult for these individuals to opt into any religious institution, because it will forever be a negative mark on their life that the religious institution manipulated them or took advantage of them in that particular situation. It is also harmful because it reduces the importance of religious institutions. So why is it bad for religious institutions to do this? Because they'll be seen as an institution that's no longer legitimate, as they are taking advantage of harmful and harsh decisions of a person. The last point of analysis, is this unfair? We don't think so. Individuals that have already acquired a particular belief, or individuals that want to acquire a particular belief, need to do it on a neutral basis. They cannot do so based on someone that is actively promoting a much better scenario than what they are facing now. If I am facing 2 hours of sunlight and the promise of a land of milk and honey where I will forever be fulfilled with all the joys and happiness that I want, is an unfair decision. We allow for individuals to ask for religious counseling. We allow for individuals to seek religious texts if they wanted to reach out. This policy, ladies and gentlemen, is good.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 13 seconds.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I would like to invite the Leader of Opposition to open the case for a sign.
Hello.
Mr. Speaker, we think the moment that the Prime Minister came up and said, we will allow religious counseling without giving us any differentiation between that and preaching, because presumably there will also be people that under pressure become spiritual or religious under their case, right? But we think that's a tremendous contradiction. Why? Because it recognizes that firstly, prisoners have the consent, the ability to make rational decisions. Having their rights taken away does not mean we take even more of their rights away and presume the entire mental faculty is corrupted. Secondly, it's also a concession that religion plays an important role in rehabilitating prisoners, and I'll talk about that in my argument. Rebuttals will be incorporated. Firstly, why is it the case that prisoners have the right, freedom, and ability to consent to what we propose on the outside? Firstly, we think that prisoners are still rational adults despite crimes that they have committed. Why is this the case? Because just because they have acted in a certain way that is not in line with a particular aspect of citizenship, that does not mean their mental faculty is completely corrupted. We understand that a lot of people commit crimes under specific economic circumstances, for example, or under a lot of passion when they were not thinking rationally. We do not think that means these people will not be able to behave rationally in society. Please sit down. But secondly, we think that the harms they brought about was twofold, right? They say firstly, this was manipulated because, we recognize there's a benefit for prisoners to have hope and therefore ascribe to religion, because what religion provides them is so great, right? We think number one, recognizing the benefits of something does not mean you can't calculate the benefit of that thing. So just because we agree with you that prisoners have a lot to benefit from, potentially, spiritually, emotionally, and socially from religion, does not mean that benefit cannot be calculated. All decisions in society is influenced by promises of benefits and harms in one way or another. Please sit down. But secondly, even under your logic, just because these people live in a harsh environment, they no longer have rationality. Like sexually abused victims, under your case, have no logic or rationality to make any kind of decision, because their decision will be directed by the fact that they've been abused before, right? We think the fact that someone has been abused, the fact that someone's living in a harsh environment, is a fact to empower and trust the choice even more. Please sit down. But lastly, they said, look, the infinitive good of internal happiness is just too much, right? You can't have a rational decision based on that. But that's the same outside of prison and inside of prison. So there is no actual difference. Please sit down. But what else are we going to talk about? We think that most Western liberal democracies still allow prisoners to vote, right? And the reason because of that is exactly because they recognize these prisoners have not lost their complete right to make actual good decisions. They have not simply failed in citizenship. Moreover, we see that in cases such as the Scandinavian model, ladies and gentlemen, when you increase trust in the prisoner's ability to make the decision that's best for themselves, please sit down, we think treating prisoners like rational consenting adults allowed us to destigmatize and incentivize prisoners to behave better. Please sit down. Let me move on to my second argument, right? How there is simply a demand, and we think that this demand should be met, and this is the role of the government. Firstly, we think this demand exists, right? Demand exists because there's pre-existing demand. Where does this pre-existing demand come from? Please sit down. Firstly, we need to understand that religious organizations that cooperate with prisoners are often the times of religious organizations that already exist in society. They understand there's a gradient in how much the prisoners are willing to listen to them, and they recognize they're not going to convert everyone. You have to understand that these religious organizations believe that it is an inherent good to help vulnerable people in society. Yes, they might go to prisoners and say, Jesus is great, because that's their understanding of how to help these people and give them hope. It's not necessarily the same thing as saying that they want to convert these people to Christians, and only then they will actually help them. We don't believe the same thing. We understand, and we think these religious organizations understand, there's a fundamental underlying baseline of spirituality that can be empowered and help the prisoners. Please sit down. But even under that case, right, we believe that most of the time, the religious organizations that help in prisons are the religious organizations that cater to majority religion in society anyways. So given that you're in a Christian country, a lot of your prisoners will be Christian. Therefore, there's a pre-existing demand. We think there's also a projected demand, right? We think dying prisoners, for example, prisoners on the death row, and prisoners who are heavily repenting, right? Because the spiritual and personal crisis, it is a justified assumption to assume that more of these people will exist under a prison, because more of them will have this kind of crisis. There will be more need to provide services to them. It will be inhumane not to cater to their spiritual need at the moment when they're about to die. It will also be inhumane remain not to allow them to rehabilitate by repenting before I move on, closing.
The fact of the matter is we're going to allow prisoners on death row to receive priests to bless them if they want to. The point of this debate is when priests actively go to non-believers and tell them this is the only way we're against it.
There's a big difference, right? The difference is number one, you assume that firstly these people make a rational decision to receive the preacher before the preacher even actually talked to him, right? There's already a fine line you're crossing, right? At the same time, why, under your case, how about the gray area that you don't even know about, right? The people in the middle that you can't assume they've been changed somehow by going to prison. The only difference we're making is that by increasing the actual level that preacher can engage with prisoners that's not even Christian. I'm going to talk about that right now, right? So firstly, I'm going to talk about how religious preaching brings about an exclusive benefit to rehabilitation, right? And we think this is the same regardless of any religion you're able to do. We think fundamentally at the end, there will be a majority religion and that's going to be the religion that we cater to. We think that's okay. We think that's just because of a pre-existing religious society. Firstly, on the first level, we think rehabilitation has exclusive benefits from religious preaching because firstly, we think when people are undergoing hard times that they're talking about, in the case of suicide, in the case of murder, in the case of violence, sexual abuse, when they live in this environment, society condemned them to that environment, spat on them, right? We think under this case, firstly, religion caters to them. Any kind of religion caters to them and their need because number one, it tells them that there is something out there that cares about you. There is a higher power out there that wants you to be better. Secondly, all kind of religion gives you a moral code. We think this moral code condition you to behave in a certain way that society and state who has failed you cannot convince you. These people are in prison, they are incredibly resentful of the state and of society because they have failed them and condemned and spat on them and put them in these harsh environments. When religion step in, they can give them a solid moral code and they can couch this not only as what we want you to do, but what is best for you. But lastly, we think religion has a very specific stories and analogies on perseverance, right? And we think that's what's important because these myths, because these stories and these spiritual stories are able to give them a sense of hope. We think this is fundamentally important at the end of the day, especially given the characterization of the harsh environment you talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't think this is just proselytizing. We think that this is helping the spiritual underlying baseline of prisoners. We believe this is a human right you should give to prisoners. We're proud to oppose.
Speakers spoke for 7 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. I would like to remind the debaters, for the benefit of the audience, to speak slightly more slowly. Having that in mind, I'd like to call Chan Lin to deliver the Deputy Prime Minister.
Now, Mr. Speaker, you can totally disregard what the L was telling you, right? Because essentially, the L didn't really engage with the model that we are presenting to them. What is the situation that we are talking about here? Under status quo, what we see is that a lot of countries, they turn to religion as an active measure to rehabilitate the prisoners. We tell you we are seeing priests, imams, or whatever Buddhist monk going into the prison, telling them that believe in God, you will find peace, you will find settlement, you will find a better future for yourself, like in life or afterlife, right? That is what's happening right now. We tell you that we are fine with individuals like John, who is in prison for, sleeping with children and things like that. And then one day realizing that he's guilty and coming to the prison authorities telling them, I need to talk to a priest. We think that particular situation is okay, right? We don't think it's okay if John is a pedophile and has Siron coming to him as a priest telling him, John, sleeping with children is not right. God can help you out. We can give you, relief. And that is the wrong way that we think right now it's being practiced. What I'm going to argue to you in my latest suggestion is two things. Firstly, why no thank you? Why rehabilitation under the secular mode, right? With psychiatrists or counseling is as good, if not better, than what you have in religion right now. And more importantly, we need to look at how manipulative the situation is, which the LO totally disregard in her speech, right? So, firstly, let's look at the rebuttals. We came up and tell you two things. One, prisoners have a consent to make a choice. Secondly, religion is important rehabilitation. Looking at the first thing, Mr. Speaker, we never said that we're going to take away religion from prisoners, right? We never said that once you become a prisoner, you can no longer have faith. We will bar you from reading up the Bible or bar you of touching anything that has to do, no thank you, has to do with religion. We only say that religion cannot have their evil outreach to you, cycling you and telling you that you must convert in order to gain a better life. That is what we are doing here, right? And secondly, we also say, ladies and gentlemen, we never treat prisoners as people who are unrational, right? We tell you the irrationality here is not because they themselves are prisoners, but because the environment that they are in that makes them irrational, right? So what is the environment? My partner has told you that there is a high tendency for men like John to be, sorry, I'm using John a lot, so let's talk about NC, yeah. Like men like NC, right, that potentially be raped by people like Yuki Oka, no sit down Yuki, and in that situation, we tell you NC will be desperate, NC will fall into despair, right? NC will be traumatized to the extent whereby he cannot reconcile with himself, no thank you. And then suddenly you have people who walks in light, telling you NC that it's okay, you know, things happen and this is life, there's a greater heaven for you, no thank you. That kind of promise is, no thank you, that kind of promise is a distortion to NC's calculus, and that distortion is something that we do not want, right? We tell you that distortion, no thank you, goes too far. Now, Worry and Shivina, no thank you, are telling you that, hey, this is life. Life is bad, right? Life is as bad as in prison, and therefore it's normal. If we allow this to happen in orphanage, or we allow this to happen in life, then that is okay. But Mr. Speaker, life do not have people coming up to you randomly and throwing soaps in front of you, right? Oh, this is a bad joke. But again, no thank you. In life, people do not treat you like shit. In life, people do not treat you like objects where you do not have names. You only have a number that is entitled to you, right? Yeah. That is not life. This is prison, ladies and gentlemen. If prison is as good as life, then why do we in the first place put them in prison to punish them? No, thank you. Now, moving on to the second point. No, thank you. No. Second point, when was telling us, oh, religion is important for rehabilitation, right? She practically said nothing. The only thing that she says is that religion can promise you a better life, can tell you that there's someone waiting out there that cares about you, can give you moral codes, and can give you stories and analogies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what's so different between, no thank you, religions, between life out there, right, where counselors like Siron can tell you stories too. Where Siron can tell you analogies or give you people, no thank you, who have been in prison, who have successfully overcome the desperate situation and have a better life for them. What's the difference between such a story with them? The only difference here is that there is a divine touch. There's a divine situation, and with divine, you are always coming back to the manipulative point. You are always treating people like irrational dolls that you can manipulate. Yes, closing.
It seems like all the problems you're talking about is sexual abuse and the horrendous conditions in prisons. Why don't you focus on solving that, but then preaching has no problem at all?
Here.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if we can solve the situation, we might have, right? But the problem now is that there's too much soap around in the prison that you can't simply solve the situation that easily. But moreover, we tell you that by having religious conversions, it is problematic. Why? Because there are certain, no thank you, there are certain religious values, right, that go against current secular values. Why do we say that? So like for example, the jihadis, extreme jihad, right, that tells people that it's legitimate to kill for the sake of the religion, that tells people that it's okay for you to discriminate against women for the sake of the religion. No, thank you. We tell you this is problematic because that way of conversion leaves a certain room for these particular prisoners, no thank you, that they can have legitimacy in certain things that they do, but which is outlawed in our society right now, right? We think that particular way of convergence still leaves room for these prisoners to step deviant away from the society, and therefore that is not the right way to go to, right? Why is it that we can reconcile them under the secular values? We tell you that when you look at, or when you see a psychiatrist or you see a counselor, what do? What they do simply is they tell you the problem, right? They make you identify the problem. They make you reconcile with yourself with the problem that you actually have. We think that yes, it is a long time for them to reconcile. Yes, it's a difficult path for them to recognize that they are actually evil from to begin with. But ultimately, these people that steps out from counseling programs, these people that manage to overcome the situation of looking at seeing psychiatrists, these people are more than capable of believing in themselves, more than capable of believing that they can create their own future, and there is no need, ladies and gentlemen, for that divine touch. There is no need for that manipulation and the distorted calculus. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that choices should go back to prisoners, that consent should go back to prisoners, and therefore we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Speakers spoke for 7 minutes and 12 seconds.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I agree with that, right? If I raped by Yuki, then it's really the nightmare, horrendous situation. But it happens in normal life every day. Under your policy, every people who is raped by someone shouldn't be preached by the religious organizations, right? But I don't think that is the case. Because you first suicide opening government, limit the debate in the raping cases. It happens every day. But I think there's a better countermeasures, right? We need to preach Yuki, and God is watching over you. That is why you shouldn't rape anybody. I think that is better idea, rather than let these people rape, then after that, I know you raped and you're having a hard life, that is why you come. Even you cannot get the religious help. I think this is a bad idea. With that, I have 3 questions in today's debate. First, is it really a first choice, right? Because they said this is not a good choice. Second idea is about rehabilitation. And last idea is about why government policy having more religious conflict inside of prisons, right? The first idea is really a first choice. They said counseling is okay. But the problem is these people, religious counselor, they always want to preaching, right? If someone came to the counseling room and they say, you know what? If you get more religious and you will be having a happy life. What is the difference is? Furthermore, if you go to prisons, they provide the bread, they provide the show, they provide sing a song and having a dance and happy life. And then that is the first choice too. But we don't think that is true. If you see the movie inside of prison, religious people get a lot of good stuff, right? And that is the first choice too. But we don't think that is true. Because my first speaker said people have some rational choices, right? If you allow any benefit inside of prisons, the religious organization can provide the prisoners, and that is the first choice too, right? I don't think that is true. They said people can have their own choice, but the problem is then who is going to provide the information? Preachers is going to provide them information. This is the good stuff. They never lock them in the prisons, again small prisons, and 2 people going there. You must, believe the religion. That is not the case. They just provide the information. That is why I think this is okay. They say they are not rational because they are having a hard life and then they need benefits. That is why they go religious. I think this is the exact same as in the society. If I broke up with my girlfriend, this is really hard life, right? Then I need help and I need joy. That is why I just go religious. Why that is different? I think this is exactly the same in the society. Closing.
The point is, in the outside world with a harsh life, you still have availability of various information. But within prison, only a particular priest comes to you to talk to you about the happiness of life. We think that's wrong.
No, I don't think that's true. You never been to lowest life in the society, right? If you don't have money, if you're bankrupt and nobody is going to help you, religious organization is only one who can help you. Who can only provide a community. I think this is exactly the same. I never been to lowest life, and they said this is lowest rather than prisoners, right? Then these guys said life is worse in the prison. I don't trust that. If I broke up with my girlfriend, everybody broke up with their lovers, and that is the lowest life. You can't say that is better than other life. No. Then they talked about this is the second suicide, right? They said when they come out of the prisons, they feel they are betrayed. They know religious lie to them, which means this choice is not going to forever, right? Because you can calculate in the rational thinking. If religious providing a less benefit, then you are not going to believe them. That this is a way more better than a way more rational choice than me, because I can do that. Yes, opening.
So the problem here right now is that We have good values in secular world. The difference between religion and secularity is that you need people, individuals, to succumb themselves lower than what they are right now, smaller than the being that they are actually. And why is that okay? Why is it okay for you to tell people that you are non-existent, there's only God for you?
Because they calculate harms and benefit. If they think even if they make them smaller and they can more benefit, and I think this is the way more rational choice than those people, because it brings more rehabilitation. Second argument, rehabilitation, right? They say secular people can bring more rehabilitation, but I don't believe that is true. There's a unique thing only religious organization can provide you. If I'm going to death because I kill a lot of people, I'm going to get death penalty. Then religious organization can only bring you joy and afterlife. The secular organization cannot provide in this. Plus, if you come out of the prisons, right, and you need a community. If you go outside of prison, if you have a criminal record, then not everybody is going to accept you. Like you guys, everybody hate criminals. I love them, but these people hate them, right? Then they can't get any community. It makes them more criminals, right? But if you go out and any region, any state can provide a religious community, I think this is the best benefit we can provide to the criminals when they get rehabilitations, right? They say secular can do the same thing, but I don't think that is true. Closing must provide us why all the secular people can provide the community and love these prisoners can have. Because biggest incentive criminals is not going to make crime again, is they don't want to turn down people who trust you. Like your own community, like the God. I don't want to turn down the God, then I'm not going to make a crime again. And the criminals don't have these kind of status in the status quo. The last argument, why government policy deters religious conflict. We understand that people worried about there's a religious conflict if there's a preaching inside of prisons, right? But the problems of government policy, there is a religious idea in the prison anyway. Even if there's no official religious preaching, there's a lot of people who have a religious idea, right? These people is going to rampantly preaching their own idea. Why? Because their God and their book said you must preaching your religious to other peoples, right? But there's no way, because inside of prisons, not the official people outside of prison can preaching to other people. And they believe this is the mission for their life. And they start preaching other people. And this preaching provides a lot of problems. Why? Because sometimes there's a lot of, extremely religious people inside of prison. If they're preaching on their own way, they will try to lead these people more extreme way. Because they believe this is the way they can save their life, and they believe this is the way they can save my life. But if there's official preaching outside of prisons, like real church, and normal pastors come to the prisons, and they will say them the right way. Religion is about love, religion is about care. You don't have to kill other people. You can trust just God, and God is going to save you. I think this is a way more better than their policy, because they can't prove in today's day there will be no preaching inside of prisons, right? There will be a preach, but there will be a less and bad forms of religious preaching rather than good forms of religious preacher. If you are the religious people, your God said you must preaching your religious, right? If there's no way you can do, and you will do by yourself your extreme ideas. For those reasons, I'm very proud of this.